basically we're still in pan time, and so welcome everybody to this little talk that we're giving over here. This is a new venture for us. I'm assuming that what I'm saying is going out. If I can just get a sort of a thumbs up from several of you that you're all hearing. Okay, cool. So I'm ready to go, right? That's what we're doing here. Hi. Lovely to see you. Some people, some of you that we haven't seen for many years, and so it's really lovely that you're here. So I'm going to start with this, that the condition that we find ourselves in reminds me a little bit of a farm in the Karoo, because there's kind of quite a lot of social distancing that goes on over there, and there's lots of sheep and there's ostriches. And what I'm getting from people is that there's sheep, that is to say there's people that are following what's going on and being told to them, and without thinking it through. And then there's the ostriches, and at least the image of the ostrich is not actually true, of people who just bury their head in the ground and don't want to see the reality of what's going on. We understand that everybody in the world is at the moment in a panic. It's a pandemic. It's pandemonium. Well, you figured out for yourself that the word pan is common to all of those, but we'll get there a little bit later. What I want to say today is we should panic. We're supposed to panic. To try and imagine that we shouldn't panic is really the sort of the mentality that was sold to us and has been systematically sold to us for the last 2,000 years, and it's erroneous. If you think about it, and I'm addressing people that are here for the first time watching, Siobhan and myself for the first time, hi, I greet you. Ideas that those of you who've been around for some years are very familiar with, and that is the edge between little me, here, me in my body and my experience of my consciousness in the world. I'm really little and I've got a permeable skin, and almost anything can come at me from the world at almost any time. A random bullet between the cops and the robbers, a driver that's drunk, God forbid, a tree falling on me, a branch on my head, or someone throwing a piano out of their 12th story building, something that I eat, something that gets stuck in my throat, an allergy that I didn't know that I had, a pathogen of so many sorts, a dispute, a slip on a banana peel that lands up in a concussion. My entire life, literally from the moment I'm born, actually even in the womb, but from the moment I'm born and I have to breathe by myself, until the moment that my body's life ceases, is a constant tension between little old me and the everything else in the universe. And that state of tension is a dynamic tension, and we experience it in our body as panic. And that is correct. That is the right response. Panic, which I'll get on to pan and the panic idea as an instinct, is a survival instinct. It's supposed to keep us alert. If we didn't have that edge, we'd simply walk into fires. We'd simply walk over the edge of cliffs and tumble down. We'd simply take on raging buffaloes in the middle of the field with our bare hands, and so on. We wouldn't tend to wounds. In other words, the panic response of the body is a natural and correct reaction, and we're supposed to panic. It's our natural condition. You think about it in the old days. What happened if a person, for example, was out by night and they fell down in a hole in the forest or something and they broke their leg? Nobody could do a darn thing very much until the following morning. You could have your sort of oil lamp or your fire and do your best, but until the sun came up the next morning, people were in a state of distress because you couldn't really see things clearly until gas lamps and then eventually electric lights pushed away the night. So that's already this pushing away the night and being able to learn to be familiar with the dark has been a constant erosion over 2,000 years of our ability to understand what our body's natural rhythms should be, and our body's natural, proper, ordinary rhythm should be, in a kind of a sense of panic. Now, I don't want to use a phrase like low-grade panic, high-grade panic, just a state of anxiety, a certain tension, a dynamic tension, a healthy, creative, dynamic tension, which is our natural position. But we have a problem. And the problem that we have is that for the last 2,000 years, systematically and incrementally, we have pushed away any feeling of chaos, any feeling of panic. Chaos has become the devil. It is the devil to scientists. The one thing that a scientist cannot allow is chaos. I'm not talking about chaos theory. Even that is an attempt to master and control chaos. I'm talking about chaos itself, random events. Science goes out of its way to sort out random events and to make them predictable. So that dreams, from the time of Calvin and Hobbes, from the time of Calvin and Luther, dreams became the devil was visiting you. Instead of the way it was in the Bible, out of which Christianity draws its roots, which is dreams are the way that God visited you. By the 13th, 14th and 15th century, it became the opposite. It became chaos. We can't trust your dreams. You can't trust. So depression is not productive. Well, we have a different view of that, and I don't want to go into the Jungian view of a renewal of personality and a going down into one. The idea of going down into one depths became something that had to be defended against. It's not productive. Fear has to be overcome by heroic action. We have to treat your depression, clear the swamp, kill the dragon, chop down the wild forest. Anything that can't be controlled and managed must be managed. That's what we've done for the last few thousand years. And that's why I gave the image of first the gas lights and then the electricity lights that pushed away the night. We've become denatured from our ability to deal with the right proportion of chaos, dreams, depression, the dark stuff, in whatever way it may be, and panic and fear. We don't know how to live with those things. And so our society has gotten to the place where we want to reduce stress and tension and depression and excitement, unless it's mediated excitement that's controlled by who's determining what excitement should be. We've pushed aside wildness, raw emotions, real creativity. Ecstatic experiences have been reduced to taking ecstasy. Passion has been pathologized into fashion and retail therapy. And enthusiasm, and the word means the visitation of the gods, has now been reduced to whatever is trending. And so hysteria, schizophrenia, manic depression, ADHD in kids, post-traumatic stress disorders are all the same condition by different names over the last 100 or so years. They're all saying when a person gets into a condition of anxiety or stress or fear, whether it be existential angst or fear of an actual event, this condition in my body has to be medicated, mediated, pushed down. Instincts are for animals. And we're not animals, we eat animals. We're not animals ourselves. And sometimes we eat animals and we get ill. But animals are primitive and instinctual, and we are not primitive and instinctual. We're humans, we're better than that, and animals and the rest of nature are at our disposal to do with what we like. Which means that our psychic resistance, our resilience, is way down. We've had millenniums now of that being enforced in us, and we've got millennium people, the new generation of adults, of how everybody gets supported. There's lots of documentation on this. How everybody's gotten supported right through their school years and their adolescent years. They've been told that they're terrific, that they're wonderful. There's no sense of failure. Everybody gets an award at school, no matter what you do. Even if it was the kid that pitched up most and sat in the front of the class, you still have to go up on stage. And then what happens with helicopter parenting is that we get to a place where the child goes out as a young adult into the world, and the world says, well, what you did today was so-so, it wasn't a great job, and they freak out. There's no capacity to hold the sense of shock and disappointment that you didn't say that I'm absolutely amazing. There is no resilience for panic. There's no resilience for anxiety or stress. In this community, we have made it a point for many, many years to emphasize in our teaching that we have the opposite approach. Our approach is that of increasing your capacity to hold stress. It's not about reducing stress, which society thinks is the big thing, everything to calm you down. We would rather say, since it's a natural condition, we would rather train and teach you to expand your capacity to hold more and more and more of your natural stress condition. We need to increase your capacity for anxiety and for passion, not to reduce it. This is not just a teaching in this community. Any creative path, I mean the arts, for example, or even creative science or philosophies, any soulful community, any religious community will teach and train you to hold more and more intensity. You want to be able to do your meditations and really get out there. You want to be able to do your dance and lose yourself in passions. You want to be able to do whatever it may be, creatively, artistically, religiously, spiritually, soulfully, intensely. But if you haven't got the capacity, if your vessel is simply too fragile, that at the first flow in of intensity you shatter, you will never have that experience. And every single conscious community, I mean in traditionally, not New Age stuff, builds you up to increase your capacity, your hold, to strengthen you, the more and the more you can. And if you doubt this, go and take a look, for example, almost anywhere, but one place that occurs to me is in the religious saints. And I mean the yogis and the Buddhists as well as the Christian mystics, for example. Go and read their descriptions of what happens to them. The intensity by which the gods or God visits them, by which the images arrive, and their madness that they go into. And it can last for weeks or months even, or even a few hours of incredible intensity, shamanic mad dances. A shaman can't do a shaman dance unless they're doing it from the ego, which is not the point at all, unless they can hold the intensity of being the bear, not pretending to put on a bear suit. And so this idea to be able to build up more capacity is critical, and what's going on. Now, I want to mention, I was going to read it, perhaps I will read it. I'll see how my time is going. I'm about 10 minutes into this, I think. That in Jung's practice of psychotherapy, there are a little section later on where what he says is, he speaks about the choosing of the profession of being a psychotherapist. And he says, Jung says over here, the doctor tries to ward off the transference as much as possible, which is understandable from the human point of view, though in certain cases it may considerably impair the therapeutic effect, because it can affect the doctor's own mental health. And a few pages later, what Jung says is that the therapist should be concerned with a patient who has psychoneurosis, because it will affect his own unconscious processes. And then he goes on to say, nor can his concern with the unconscious be explained by free choice of interest, but rather a fateful disposition which originally inclined him to the medical profession. The doctor knows, or at least he should know, that he did not choose this career by chance, and that the psychotherapist in particular should clearly understand that psychic infections, however superfluous they seem to him, are the fact of the predestined concomitants of his work, and fully in accord with his instinctual dispositions of his own life. Now, let me translate that into very simple terms. If you want to be a psychotherapist, you have to be open to being affected by your patient's images. When somebody brings you their dream or their daily events as a therapist, you can't sit there and objectively, this is not clinical psychology, and note it down and try and analyze it. What you have to do is you have to respond. You have to be open. You have to be affected. And it's not the first, it's not the last time I'm going to say in this talk today that to be affected is to be infected. They connect, those two ideas. You will be affected by your patients. So you have 3 patients, 6 patients in a day, each one bringing you perverse dreams and weird images and their imagination, and you, the therapist, are sitting there, and you have to allow all those images in, because if you can't allow them inside your own body, then you can't work with the patient's images. Then you're just imposing a structure, and then you must go to a dream analysis book, for example, and try and figure out what Jungian symbols mean and try and impose something or modify it by behavior. But that's not the way of depth therapy. Now, I'm using this as an analogy to say, in that sense, everybody sitting here today needs to understand that they are themselves a therapist, a psychotherapist. The only way we can respond adequately to the world is to be open and to allow the world to penetrate us. That's the only way we have a dialogue. Otherwise, we are cut off, isolated, and anything that is isolated and cut off will stagnate and die. There will be no renewal, there will be no creativity, there will be no eroticism. So that means that we have to allow ourselves to be affected and infected. We penetrate other, they penetrate us. One of the dictums of alchemy is whenever two chemicals come into a relationship, they affect one another. Both are affected. And this is the way, not just, I use the example from Jung in psychotherapy, but this is not about psychotherapy, it's about the way to live. Now you're going to say to me, yes. But the difference is, we're dealing with coronavirus over here, and this is real. What you're talking about is psychic infection. And that's all very well, and I agree with you, and it's psychic infection, and hey, I got it, and it's about psychology, and I will be open in my soul, and I will get the images, and I'll bring them in, and I'll work with them, and I'll be affected, and if you really insist, I'll be infected by ideas and philosophy and consciousness and my talk with the ocean, and the ocean can penetrate me. And I will be infected by the mountains when I'm out there in nature. But that's psychically. This is real. That's the difference, you'll say. No. From the world view that regards the soul as real, not something that is a soothing explanation, pretending to myself, making up a fantasy. I was going to say like the Easter Bunny, but everybody knows the Easter Bunny is actually real.
Just interrupt for a moment. So technically, quite a few people have been kicked out and they need to be let back in.
Oh, I see.
I don't know how that happens.
Waiting 5.
Okay.
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 Are we good?
And yes, and everyone says they're following.
Okay, lovely.
It's quite clear.
Okay, super. Thank
Okay.
you. That's lovely. Thanks for the breather. Because I'm now, in fact, in the next chapter of what I want to say.
Okay.
Is there something that you want
No,
to add at this point?
I'm just clarifying what you were saying is we need to be infected psychically. That's the only way that we have a living erotic dialogue with a person's material, and that we don't interpret it so we lose what was trying to speak through them.
Okay.
And then you're saying just because this is happening on this plane of reality,
Now I'm beginning to talk to
and
that
that's
point.
where you're going to now.
That's where I'm
So
going
I
to
just
now.
want to check because that's where we were interrupted.
Thank
Okay.
you. Are we good?
Okay.
So if it's okay, then I'll carry on?
Yes.
Okay. So this business of, for people that have a creative or a soulful or religious life of any sort, we do not believe for ourselves that the soul is something and the dialogue with the gods is something that I make up. We believe that they are real. The view of a shaman talking to animal spirits, of the alchemist watching the chemicals, Gnosticism, Kabbalah, yoga, Taoism, a Dionysian mystery, animism, any lived into religions, whether they be polytheism or monotheism, says that the dialogues with my God or my gods are not a made-up mind trip. These are lived into experiences. They're every bit as real as what I experience on this level of reality. They're also realities. We take psychic reality to be as real as the experience of the physical world. Or, more correctly, if we want to say it, we take the physical world to be as psychic as any other level of psychic reality. All the ways that we experience ourselves in our lives, and this is one of them. So our view of dealing with this reality is that it should not be different to the way that we deal with all other realities. With other realities, in our soulful devotions, we should be paying attention, we should give devotion, we should be respectful, we should find ways of being mindful. If we enter a temple, we remove our shoes. While we're praying and meditating, we don't gossip. When we eat food, we offer a prayer of thanks, and we share that food with others. When there is an illness that can be transmitted, we wash our hands. We observe a certain amount of distance, more to not affect others than that they, without their conscious engagement, than that they should affect us. More on the practical side in a moment. We should panic. Because when we panic, what it means is it's Pan arriving. Now, Pan in Greek mythology is the personification of anxiety, of panic, of fear, of compulsive action, and it manifests, for example, in a silly thing like panic shopping. We see in the behavior of individuals, oh, they're gripped by that force. And we have a name for that force in Greek mythology. We say, oh, that's Pan. That's what it means when we say that's Pan. Pan is instinct, raw, intuitive, unreflected, undigested nature, reaction, fight, flight. And the key point about Pan, the archetype of Pan, the god Pan, is that it's all about the body. It affects us. Pan is about something arriving in your body. It's not an idea. It's about the force that arrives in your body, and it's not a philosophy. It's an emotional, embodied experience. That's what we mean when we say, oh, Pan has arrived. Now, in our society, we no longer live our body very much, or the only way in which we live our body really is in our pathologized body. We only really know that we feel something when it afflicts us, when we suffer. But the root of pathology is the word pathos, and it goes to the word passion as much as the word pathology, and that's why we speak about the passion of the Christ. We mean the suffering. This is the last place that these primal forces can get our attention. Now, since I've stepped in there, I have to make a little comment. And this one comes from Hillman's writing, and I'll be brief over here. And Hillman says, we have to look at the fundamental tenet of archetypal psychology is the interchangeability of mythology and psychology. Mythology is a psychology of antiquity. Psychology is a mythology of modernity. The ancients had no psychology, properly speaking, but they had myths. The speculative tellings about humans in relation with more than human forces and images, we moderns have no mythology, properly speaking, but we have psychological systems, the speculative theories about humans in relation to the more than human forces and images, today called fields, instincts, drives, and complexes. Now that capacity to speak, to look at mythology and to find a psychological reflection, this mythology is psychology, allows us to take a look at a mythology. I've been looking at Pan, for example, and saying, oh, that's what we mean when we say the god Pan arrives. It's an instinctual force that affects our body, and the reason is because we need to be embodied. But we'll get to that in a moment. But now that I've opened that door, I want to go to another myth. And the myth that I want to go to is the Greek myth of Coronis. There is a Greek myth of a woman called Coronis. Coronis was the wife of Apollo. Apollo was a poet, a musician, an oracle, a healer, a dragon killer, a python slayer, the hero over chaos, culture and mind over the instincts of the body. That's what Apollo did. He was amazing, he was a poet, he was a musician, he was a healer, but he slayed the python in Delphi, and he killed dragons and all sorts of chaos. He stomped them out and wiped them out.
Which was necessary for culture.
It is culture, probably.
It is culture.
It probably is culture.
But we've exceeded
Way
culture.
exceeded.
Yeah.
There is a story in Apollo's life where he has a competition between, in some tellings, either Pan or a Pan-like figure. It's a musical competition to see who plays the best music. Apollo is on his lute and Pan is on his pipes. Eventually, Apollo, they tie, and eventually they have a sort of a rematch, and then Apollo says, let's play them upside down, which is very difficult to do with the breath. And so Apollo wins that, and Pan gets punished, or in a different telling of the story, the Pan figure, who is a kind of a follower of Pan, gets flayed alive. Now, there is no tolerance for Pan. Apollo has no tolerance for Pan or for chaos. Okay, Coronis is married to Apollo.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought she was
And
just
Coronis, Apollo goes off to slay dragons, kill the python, do what he wants to do, and while he's away, Coronis has an affair. Go Coronis. And in anger and defense over her brother, Artemis kills her. But Apollo feels sorry for the unborn child, his child, that's inside her belly, and Apollo saves the unborn child. Guess who the kid is?
Gareth, pick me.
Okay.
No. Gareth's bad.
You know who their child is? Asclepius,
Yeah.
the god of medicine. Him of the snake winding up the staff. The same snake winding up the same staff that Moses holds up to the people in the desert to heal them. Asclepius is the god. He has Apollo as his father. He's the god of soulful medicine. And he gets educated by a centaur, Chiron. Chiron is a mixture of half animal instinct and half man. So he's got both qualities together, the human side and the raw animal instinct together. So the denouement of Corona's story is like this. First she has a connection.
Sorry, other people have been kicked off.
I would say, I'm not sure why people are
Yeah,
kicked off. We're just having to remedy that. Okay, so the denouement of Corona is like this. First, she has a connection with the over-cultured, heroic disrespect for raw nature, the rustic song, the chaos, and the animal has to be conquered. And that's what fills her and impregnates her. That's what seeded her. but her passion rises and she connects erotically with her desires that return her back to something raw and primitive. And this causes her pathology, and she dies. But what she gives birth to is a renewal of healing, soul medicine, the return to the body and the conversation with the gods. May I carry on? Have I gone too far?
That's okay. How's our time?
I'm not sure how our time is.
Yeah.
Okay, can I just have from the people on the screen a thumbs up if we're okay to carry on for the last section?
Yes,
We're okay? We're having fun? Thank you. So now I
So
want to...
can I just add
Yes.
in there, because Asclepius was also attended by therapeutai, which is, the term therapeutai meant one who is attendant to the gods. So our medicine, because of the rise of culture and the necessity of that, has also lost attendance to the gods because science has had to do something else. So people who are interested in the psyche you're describing, are having to pick up a role that our healthcare can't in the panic. So we have to be attendant to the gods.
Negated, actually.
Yeah.
It's not even that they don't, it's like they just
And
nullify
one
it.
of the things I liked in the story is, listen to Asclepius's children. So his daughters are Hygienia, Hygiene, the goddess of cleanliness; Iaso, the goddess of recuperation and illness; Acheso, the goddess of healing; Egil, the goddess of good health; and Panacea, the goddess of universal remedy.
Cool.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. So, then into the last stretch. Why save the health system? We finished the main body, and I've told you the ideas that I say as regards the main crisis. So there is an old story from Greek mythology. I do have the name of the person involved. It is Protagoras. Protagoras in ancient Greek is a lawyer, and the story goes like this. Protagoras is a lawyer, and he gets a student who comes into him, and the student says, listen, I want to study with you, but I haven't got the fees to pay you, but when I win my first case legally, I will pay you. So Protagoras says, okay, cool, you can study with me, and he studies, and the student leaves and he gets out into practice, but he hasn't been paid. So Protagoras thinks to himself like this: I'm going to sue this guy in court because he hasn't paid me. I'm going to sue him for non-payment. And he figures like this: if I win the case, he'll have to pay me because I've won the case to sue for non-payment. If I lose the case, he'll have to pay me because he said he would pay me when he won a case. His student thinks like this: if I win the case, I won't have to pay him because it's about lack of payment. And if I win the case, then that means I've won, I don't have to pay him. If I lose the case, I won't have to pay him because I won't have won, so I don't have to pay him over there. So each of them has got this paradox, by the way, in legal terms, has never been resolved. Each one thinks what they think, and each has got a convincing argument from their own side. And we've kind of got that situation in the world today. And how do we deal with this crisis? Who decided to save the national health systems, the medical systems, from collapsing at the expense of all the other systems, mostly the financial and the economic? This could easily lead to poverty, food supplies, various kinds of struggles, recovery. People don't have money, they're desperate. There's all kinds of chaos that's there. But it's not only the financial system that is being thrown out to protect the health system. Also the educational system, the sports system, the arts and culture system, even the religious community that depends on people gathering together in groups. You can do online praying, but it's just not the same thing. People want to be with other people. So the religious system, the cultural and arts, the sports, and the educational system are all being said, we will sacrifice you for the sake of the health system. Is this a conspiracy, as some people have proposed? This is somehow someone wanting to take over the world's capital or ruin capitalism or something. My own view is no. This is not a conspiracy, it's stupidity. I don't think anybody's worked it out, and it's wrong to say stupidity. It's not even stupidity. It's just the same old fear of death that has always taken precedence over every single human behavior from the beginning of human culture. It is the foundation. Death, dealing with death, is the foundation of human culture. Every single religious system, whether monotheistic or polytheistic, every agricultural system and development, every war, rituals, tribal identities are driven by one single idea, which is, how do we understand the meaning of death, dying and death? It's the ultimate mystery. People want to know what happens to that life force. Where does it go? And from there we've got eschatology. We've got all the heavens and the hells and the fields of glory and the 24 virgins. What will happen to you after you die, or not happen, or you'll go to hell, or nothing will happen, or you'll dissolve. Everybody's got a theory. Burial systems. Most churches and temples firstly had wise people and holy people buried in them, and then the temple was built around that, and then the temple was built over that, and they still are today, mostly buried inside there. It's all about how do we human beings understand. Look at the pyramids. Look at the clay warriors that were buried with the Chinese emperor. People, and gold buried underground. Why do people put their best clothes on and their gold and jewels with the dead underground? It's all about this mystery of the death. What happens after death? Even atheism is after the same one single idea. It's a way to understand, how do I deal with death? Atheism's response is, we don't believe in that stuff at all. It's just meaningless, or whatever you want to say about it. And actually, death should be our concern. It's correct. The soul is our concern. And in traditional mythology, the thing that the function, the animal soul, the body's life force, the nefesh behema, the thymus, rules the body while a person is alive, and at death, the psyche lives eternally, comes into its own and lives eternally. So the question of death is a question of soul. So we have to ask then, what does the panic want? I think my time is pressing, but I do have a little sweet Yiddish story, but I don't know if I can tell it. Shall I tell that little joke? Okay, so you have to understand this. In Hebrew and Yiddish, the word avera means a sin. It's an avera. Oh, you did an avera. You did a sin. You did a wrongful action. So there's a little story, little joke about the rabbi goes to his doctor. He says, "Doctor, I'm not feeling well." The doctor examines him and he says, "It's a virus." The rabbi says, "I know it's a virus, but what's wrong with me?" Okay, if you follow the joke, then that's a sweet little one. So what does the panic want? Pan wants nymphs. In mythology, Pan wants nymphs. Nymphs mean reflection. Reflection makes soul. We need this time of enforced isolation to recalibrate, to reflect on our values, how the world got so lost and greedy and unfair, and the haves and the have-nots and the oceans, and the children being influences in a place without adults. We need to reclaim our lives mythically. We need to re-establish our dialogue with the gods. When we do that, then the death of Coronis is the birth of the soul doctor Asclepius, the gift of healing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So I think now, if you want to, are you good?
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
I wanted to add in one.
Please.
Maybe it's going a little bit too far. And you're saying, what does panic want? Pan wants nymphs. First of all, we also have to relate to Pan. So if we become only anxious, then we don't have that reflection that he's after to meet him.
Yeah.
And if we only go for reflection, we don't have pan. So we have to have pan and the nymphs together. And for me, this goes to something about, even when we were setting up these talks, and I was saying to the little group here, I'm so tired of hope being offered and freebies and sentimentality. I mean, it's a horrific time, and I understand it. But this idea of building capacity and going towards death rather than protecting from it as a psychic metaphor, for me is something about, how do we sit without hope? Because the moment we are hoping, the moment we are trying to allay our fears, we are not here anymore. So we are no longer with panic, which means we can no longer be close to the nymphs in an embodied way. So
that's lovely, thank you.
One of the things that I wanted to leave you with as one of the primary motivators in my life is trying to understand this statement by Hillman psychically. And I love what you say, you and me are as psychically real as my dream figures are psychically real. We are all psychic, and yet we have this incredible embodied experience. And it's nothing like a time like this that takes away so much of our connection and our access to the world to really value it. And that's interesting to me. But one of the statements that I have loved is, death is the cure of the rage to live. So I leave you with that thought, because that sits with me daily, and how to take that into this situation.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I'm sure that we'll have some other things. My clock says I'm about 40 minutes or something into this. We'd kind of intended that we would do this, if we wanted to, for up to an hour. So at this point, I'm happy to take questions, and just press your unmute and see what happened for you, or make comments. You can tell me what you heard today, or what worked or didn't, or what you need, or what's going on for you. Let's hear from... Hi.
So for me, this period has brought on a very visceral experience of panic. I've never experienced it more in the body than over this time. And it feels like it's pulsating through me. And the relationship to it feels just physical. And I'm trying to find for myself a sort of that tension that you've been speaking about, both of you, around, you know, the cure to life is death. You know, what is that middle space where you're not the pan and you're not the nymph, and that you're actually able to hold and house this energy and use it, maybe, if that's the intention. I'm not sure what the intention is, in the sense of where does the energy want to go to.
For my first comment is, I'm going to say, I'm always suspicious of a sentence that includes, and how do I use it? Because that puts it straight back into the utilitarian, heroic mind. Okay, what is this? How can I use it? What value is it of me? Rather than just being with the experience. And I think, do you want to address this?
No, Oran, just knowing you as the powerful dreamer that you are, who've spent so much time trying to anchor into your body, almost as you developed to compensate for a natural instinctual dreaming capacity. It must be amazing, actually, for you to have electricity charging through a body that places you there. So and you've spent years studying here, so you have the capacity to sit with that. So for me, that would probably be, I would ask you another question when the lights are dimmed and said, and how erotic is that for you? I know that's a strange thing to ask you, but that is a way of feeling intensely alive, in a different way of understanding being alive.
I think I'm going to pick up on what Siobhan said over there, which is, so you're having this embodied experience, and you correctly give it a label, and you say it's panic, but the next sentence is it's bad and it's not okay. And what I spoke about today is, that's just because you're not familiar holding it. And now it's not an abstract idea. Now it's visceral and alive and in your body. In terms of the what do I do with it, we've already addressed the matter of Pan looks for Nancy, looks for reflection. There has to be a dynamic tension. Siobhan said that you can't have too much reflection because you're disembodied. You can't have too much body without reflection. Then the whole system doesn't work. It just leads to compulsion. But certainly to just be with, to notice yourself in the state of Pan and notice how that makes you do things. And I think that might be where Siobhan is saying, how erotic is it? It's like, how do you walk to the kitchen? How do you make yourself a cup of tea? How do you experience yourself drinking a cup of tea? How do you pick up your child? How do you play? How much do you value your life? And especially because you've got a young child and so on. All of this stuff is like, it's really up close and personal. And I think that's all that's really being demanded of you right now, rather than to look for a heroic outcome. Next?
Thanks, Oren.
Thanks.
Who's next, Karen?
Hi guys, thanks for the lecture. It was fantastic.
Hi, Jared.
So I've just got I'm curious about your thoughts on this. Trying to think of the coronavirus from, say, its archetypal perspective and looking at it from, the literalization or the pathology. So what happens with the coronavirus? It obviously attacks your lungs, and then it forms this like thick mucousy layer over your lungs, which then makes it hard to breathe. And it doesn't take too much of a leap to see the parallel in what's going on with climate change. So I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts there. Do you think there's any kind of parallel?
Jared, I can't see your face on, but I can recognize your voice. I think you pretty much answered your question. Sure. We're talking about an embodied experience. We could actually use the idea of I can't breathe on a number of different discussions, but let's take the one that you've brought up, and then I'll bring up a second one in a moment. Sure, there's a parallel. The earth can't breathe, the oceans can't breathe, the jungles are being chopped down, so there's no what was called the Amazon, the lungs of the world, because some idiot figures that it would be more worthwhile to chop down the forest and put cows there. I'm not going into that, but sure, the earth has stopped breathing. It can't catch its breath. And this idea of catch your breath, take a breather, dude, that's pretty much what we're saying. Is that's what the nymphs reflect. Pan represents compulsion, chopping down the forests, the Amazon, and throwing our junk into the ocean and filling everything else, carbon fuels and so on, is compulsive action.
And going the other way is also compulsive action. Overly ecological. Now we must save,
everything.
The ants and the mosquitoes and everything. Yeah.
Yes, and that's an important point, which we'd have to attend to just see what the other side is. But sure, that's compulsion. And the lesson is take a breather. Just stop, catch your breath. And sure, I think so. I think in that sense, sure. Everything in our view, a sort of a holistic view. I want to share with you that I saw one good line in a movie, if I may, on this model of holistic. I didn't like the series, but I did like this one line. In this line, there's a character that says, I'm a holistic assassin.
I loved it.
And I'm a holistic assassin. What I do is I just kill anybody that I meet, and I trust that universe put them in my way, and they were meant to be my target that I had to eliminate. So we've got to watch out for this holistic view on the other side too much. The other side, Jared, of breathing is breathing is the single event that indicates the beginning of your life. It's the first thing that you have to do when you separate out from the mother. You have to breathe for yourself. If you don't get that right, sorry, it's game over. So breath always goes to the establishment of an individual identity. So in addition to the environmental correlate over here, we are also looking for individuals to say, right, take back your own life. Stop being connected umbilically to the mother, whatever that may represent.
And also don't be so individual that you've forgotten how connected we are, because look how connected Corona has shown us, how easily we touch and affect and infect one another.
Jung's phrase with that is, don't muddle up individuality or individuating with individualism.
And then, Jared, I wanted to come from another perspective, because if we get into all the nitty-gritty details of the symptoms of a life that, from our perspective, we're saying people are not living soulfully. We may have the soul of washing machines and the soul of angel cards and kind of the places that soul has managed to do a very little strange, sorry dance. But from our perspective, we've lost this place between the nymphs and Pan, because we've lost Pan and the nymphs. So, and we've lost our sense of embodiment. I would come from another perspective and say, so this pause that is being asked of us, what does that draw us into? And I would go to the place where human stress is so much as, wow, I wonder if I could come back to an embodied state where I could find things beautiful again in their suchness. I could look at something and respect it for what it is, rather than thinking it should be something else. Because if I find things beautiful, I will be moved to take care of them. And we need to take care of our world, we need to take care of our culture, we need to take care of ourselves, and we need to take care of each other. And sometimes that means not taking care of us. How do we know that line? So that's where I would come in on that thing. I would want to shift an attitude rather than dealing with the details.
Thank you. Can we have another?
Thanks, Jared.
We've got Nan.
Nan? Hi? Can't hear you. You have to press unmute.
Nan?
Yeah,
Okay,
there you
there
go.
you are.
Hello, got
Hi.
it. Right. We're talking about reflection to build capacity in this time of heat and fever. And I was wondering if we are talking about a different kind of reflection. We often think of reflection as a mental activity, but we're talking about a reflection through the heart or through the imagination or another. Can you talk about what this kind of reflection is that we actually
Okay. I'm going to deal with this quite quickly here, Nan, just because we're coming close into the hour. You're correct. This is not a mental reflection. Actually, what's interesting is it's not even quite yet the reflection of the heart. It's a reflection of the body. Pan is instinct, and like cures like. And you can't mix things that are unlike together. Unlike things don't join. In one of the lectures that are prepared, I use an image over there where I said, no matter how horny the cockerel is, he is not turned on by a mare in heat. You have to have the same species. And so what that means is the nymphs are as much instinctual raw nature as Pan. That's why Pan is after the nymphs. So the type of reflection that we're talking about and that the nymphs offer is an instinctual, raw, embodied reflection. And if you wanted the Kabbalah of it, the Kabbalah would say like this: the primal instinctual reaction to world arrives in the body from inside or from outside, by the way, but it arrives as an embodied experience. It rises up to the mind, it falls down into the heart, and it rises up into the mouth and prayer, into action and prayer. So that's the answer that I'll give there. Can I take next?
We've
Thanks.
got Mark Derman and then Jonah Pick.
Okay. Mark, you're up.
Thank you for a lovely and important talk, Mordechai.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask if you could please explain the link between pan or panic and compulsion.
Okay.
They sound a bit
This is the
strange, but
yes, I understand. Pan is the god of panics. When we say, I mean in mythology, but that doesn't quite answer it. I'm answering that tautologically, I understand. What we mean when we say Pan is we don't just mean an abstract archetype. We have to avoid that kind of Jungian move and go to a more archetypal move and say, no, we mean a god, an active living force of nature. But nevertheless, Pan is that force of nature which is instinctual compulsion, and it manifests in a number of different ways. I didn't pick it up with Nan, but I'm going to pick it up now, which is to say for those of you in the community over here, you'll know from the calendar that we were planning already from last year to do a series of lectures. They were supposed to be last weekend, in fact, on compulsion. So they were in fact on Pan. They were always intended from September last year. We had set it up that right at this exact time we would do a series of lectures on Pan. Those lectures are tightening up. We've had to do other things in the meantime, and God's willing, in a week or so, something like that, we'll begin the first of the 4 lectures on compulsion, and mark that, and Nan's question of what kind of reflection is this? What does it mean, instinctual reflection, as opposed to intellectual or creative mental reflection? What does that mean? Or Mark's question of how do we link Pan with panic, and what does it mean? Because it's not just compulsion and panic. There are several words associated with the idea of instinct, primal, raw nature, instinct arriving in the body, and they include panic, anxiety, fear, angst, compulsion, and erotic desire. But we'll get on to that. And that's all covered in the lectures. We'll let you know, those of you.
Yeah, and just these what we're calling panic. These are like the wind, like the air, like the sun, like a tornado. These are movements through the earth plane that are happening, whether we like it or not, and they move through us as well. These are movements inside of us that we need to be able to open to, or we defend against them. The more we defend against and not allow them to flow through, the more they arrive as visitations in the forms of pathologies or natural disasters. Or it's the way that this environment speaks, this global, this spiritual, this philosophical environment speaks, is through these forces having to break through because we cannot house them, because we do not open to them.
Thank you. Okay, Joanna?
So I want to ask, again, thank you for the lecture. I want to ask about an image that I can't quite figure out what it is, that keeps coming to me with this pandemic, which is the way people die and what happens after they die. The thought that, my father could die, my father could get sick tomorrow, and it's not because some policeman doesn't want me out of my house, but I just can't fly to France to be with him. And even if I could, the hospital wouldn't let me in.
That's the point.
And that if he died tomorrow, we could not have a funeral for an undetermined amount of time. And so what's been stuck with me is the people dying and the stories of people who are dying and are sad, not because they're dying, but the doctor's saying they're sad because they know they have to die alone.
Yeah.
And the families that can't get to people or can't bury people.
Joanna, you've hit on something that in my own reflections I consider to be probably the scariest part, the worst part in that, and the most difficult part of this current crisis is that not that people die, it's a natural fact, but that people die alone. And that's really horrible. I remember an interview with Dr. Kevorkian. You remember he was the euthanasia guy that got arrested and stuff. And he was asked, since you're an expert in death, what's the worst way to die? And he didn't hesitate. He said the worst way to die is to die alone. And for people to have their parents, for example, die in a hospital bed without them being able to be there or hold their hands, this is a real problem. I don't know if I entirely agree with that, but I do understand that on the medical model they need to contain it and so on and so on. Maybe that needs to be thought through. But if this is the reality, and if we're going to allow our fear of death to say that the medical system can overrule all the other systems, then we're going to have to say that people are going to have to meet their dying parents and siblings and friends and so on in different ways at other times. The point is, as Hillman has pointed out, as everybody's pointed out, as long as we remember a person and we bring them up into memory, they are alive. For as long as we do that. So even though that may not be quite the level of body comfort that we'd like, it's the way that you would have to deal with it if, God forbid, you got news that a friend of yours was traveling overseas and they died. Well, you weren't there. How are you going to speak to them and say goodbye to them? You're going to meet them psychically.
So Joanna, also this, again, it goes to this question of death and how we meet death and death's presence in our lives. Can you imagine if in some kind of our form of utopian future where death is welcomed and people, when death visits, they're open to greet death. There's a reconciliation, even if it's too soon or if it's through pain, or it's like, oh my gosh, like Job, I'll go through anything because that means God was close to me. All those trials meant that God was speaking to me. So if we can get to that kind of relationship to death, that means you will never really die alone. And even if you can't physically be present with the person who is dying, you can certainly be psychically present and can even travel with and help release that soul. That's what the shamans do. That's what the artists do in a way. So even now with our limited capacity, there really are ways of not literally being present because we're caught in this model, and this is the model that is up for review right now. We're forced into reviewing it. But in our own limited way, there's ways of moving through the heart and through the dream landscape and being so close to that. People probably even more close than if you were having to deal with the family and the situation and being right close to death. So there's ways of really greeting death. But what you're saying is very poignant for me, because Mordecai and I both talked about how sad that is not to be present at someone's bedside and say goodbye. But the other side of that is also some people say, God, thank heavens I'm alone, because people try and hold me back and I need to go now. That's also another darkened perspective.
Thank you. I don't know where you want to go, guys. We're over an hour now. Is there anybody that feels that they've got a really burning issue
Feverish issue
that needs to be addressed? Okay. So I thank you, everybody. Thanks for lovely to see all of you guys and this beautiful, amazing group of community of people that have come together, and especially to the people who I'm not seeing on my screen that have pitched up here for the first time. It's really been a wonderful opportunity to be able to greet you and to be able to talk with you as well. We'll send you an email. If you please send us an email, especially the people that we know, everybody. Please send us what your view is. Do you want some more? Because the original idea is that we can try and consider doing this
Thanks, Gregor.
over the next period of time. Yeah. Let's get your feedback. Thank you so much. It's really been wonderful. Thanks for the privilege. Thank you, Siobhan.
Cheers.
And thanks for all the support.
Bye, everyone.
That we got. Bye.
So nice.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.